Richard Milhous Nixon, the 37th President of the United States, is remembered as a figure who shaped American politics through a career marked by significant accomplishments, controversy, and ultimate disgrace. Born on January 9, 1913, in Yorba Linda, California, Nixon was raised in a family that instilled in him the values of hard work and self-discipline. His early life was marked by financial struggle, but he excelled academically, earning a scholarship to attend Whittier College and later a law degree from Duke University in 1937. Nixon's political career began in 1947 when he was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives from California. His rise was propelled by his staunch anti-communism and his involvement in the investigation of Alger Hiss, a former State Department official accused of espionage. Nixon's aggressive pursuit of Hiss, who was convicted of perjury in 1950, made him a national figure and earned him the nickname Tricky Dick. In 1950, Nixon was elected to the Senate, where he gained further prominence in the 1950s. His political career reached new heights when he was selected as the running mate of Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1952. As vice president from 1953 to 1961, Nixon's foreign policy experience expanded, and he represented the U.S. on numerous diplomatic trips, particularly to Latin America, Asia, and Europe. His most notable visit occurred in 1959 when he traveled to Moscow and famously clashed with Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev in what became known as the Kitchen Debate. In 1960, Nixon ran for president against John F. Kennedy, a young and charismatic senator from Massachusetts. The election was fiercely contested, with the candidates clashing on issues like the Cold War and domestic policy. Nixon's defeat, while narrow, was partially attributed to his poor performance in the first-ever televised presidential debates, where Kennedy's composure and appearance won over the American public. Despite the loss, Nixon remained a formidable force in American politics. He spent the next several years rebuilding his reputation and preparing for a comeback. In 1968, after a period of political setbacks, Nixon won the Republican nomination for president. His campaign focused on law and order, advocating for the restoration of American values and promising to end the divisive Vietnam War. Nixon's victory in the 1968 election, defeating Vice President Hubert Humphrey, marked the beginning of his first term as president. As president, Nixon worked to achieve several notable accomplishments. Domestically, he introduced policies to curb inflation and unemployment, including wage and price controls. He also initiated a comprehensive approach to environmental protection, signing into law the National Environmental Policy Act and creating the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, in 1970. On the international stage, Nixon's foreign policy was groundbreaking. In 1972, he made a historic visit to China, which led to the normalization of relations between the two countries and significantly altered the global balance of power. Nixon also pursued détente with the Soviet Union, leading to the signing of the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks SALT-I Agreement in 1972, aimed at limiting nuclear weapons. However, Nixon's presidency was marred by the ongoing Vietnam War. Despite his promises to end the conflict, the war continued throughout his first term, and protests against it grew in intensity. Nixon's decision to expand the war into Cambodia in 1970 led to further domestic unrest, culminating in the Kent State shootings in 1970, where National Guardsmen killed 4 students during an anti-war protest. Nixon's second term began in 1972 with a landslide re-election victory over Democratic nominee George McGovern. However, it was during this period that the Watergate scandal began to unfold, ultimately leading to Nixon's downfall. In June 1972, 5 men were arrested for breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. While the break-in was initially seen as a minor crime, investigations soon revealed that members of Nixon's re-election campaign, known as the Committee to Re-elect the President, CREEP, had orchestrated the burglary and attempted to cover it up. Over the next 2 years, a series of revelations, including taped conversations that directly implicated Nixon, revealed a widespread pattern of corruption and abuse of power. The scandal deepened when it was discovered that Nixon had secretly recorded conversations in the White House, including those discussing the Watergate cover-up. The so-called Watergate tapes became central to the investigation. In July 1974, the Supreme Court ruled that Nixon must turn over the tapes, and they revealed that he had been involved in the obstruction of justice. Facing imminent impeachment by the House of Representatives, Nixon became the first U.S. president to resign from office on August 9, 1974, to avoid certain impeachment. His vice president, Gerald Ford, succeeded him and controversially pardoned Nixon for any crimes he may have committed while in office. After his resignation, Nixon withdrew from the public eye for several years. He spent much of his time writing and giving speeches. Nixon's post-presidency period marked a return to diplomacy, with him acting as an unofficial envoy to world leaders. His 1980s book, The Real War, and his later work on international relations, particularly in relation to China and the Soviet Union, garnered respect from some quarters despite the lingering taint of Watergate. In 1994, Nixon died of a stroke at the age of 81. His legacy remains a complex one, marked by both significant achievements in foreign policy and a tragic fall from grace due to the Watergate scandal. Nixon's presidency and resignation changed the nature of American politics, fostering greater public cynicism toward political leaders and reshaping the way future presidents would be held accountable for their actions. Though his career was deeply flawed, Richard Nixon's impact on the nation remained significant.